Hey listeners, it's Kara, your host. After 176 amazing episodes and hundreds of book recommendations, I wanted to make it a little bit easier for you to find your next great read. The Bookish Lights Roadmap is your guide to all 175 podcast episodes, sorted by genre so you can quickly find the stories that fit your reading mood. From picture books to adult novels and everything in between, it's the perfect way to explore past episodes and discover new favorites. You can find your copy of the Bookish Lights Roadmap at www.bookishlights.com/read/roadmap, or just click the link in the show notes. Hi, I'm Kara Infante, and this is Bookish Flights, a podcast where we tell our stories through our favorite books. Each episode features a bookish guest where we will talk about reading, life, and the seasons we're in, all through a thoughtfully paired book flight of recommendations for you. If you're looking for meaningful book recommendations and a space to slow down, you're in the right place. In today's episode, I am chatting with Landis Wade. Landis is a recovering trial lawyer turned author of mysteries and legal thrillers, knowing for blending humor, history, and clever puzzles into his stories. He's also the founder of the Charlotte Readers podcast, where he's interviewed more than 500 authors, and the creator of the Right Quote series, 8 books filled with inspiration and wisdom from those conversations. His latest novel, Deadly Gold Rush, is the second book in his indie retirement mystery series, and dives into the fascinating history of the Carolina Gold Rush. Welcome to the show, Landis.
Thank you very much for having me. I look forward to this conversation. Thank you.
Yes. Well, as I've mentioned here in your bio, you've gone from trial lawyer to author to podcaster. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and that journey?
Yeah, so I was a practicing lawyer for 35 years. Did trial work, civil trial work, not criminal, but I was in court a lot and a lot of conflict involved. But I was experiencing conflict on a daily basis, and I thought, wouldn't it be nice to try to control the conflict? How can I do that? Well, you're right about the conflict instead of experience it on a daily basis. But seriously, I was in my mid-50s. The kids were off; they're in college doing their things, and I'm toward the end of my career, and I'm thinking, what will my third act be? What am I going to do? And I always wanted to write, and I was always enjoyed history, and I thought, okay, I'll try writing. And of course, a lawyer going from lawyer writing to fiction writing is two different things entirely. So there was a lot to learn, and I thought, how am I going to learn that? I thought, I know, I'll do something I don't know how to do, some other thing. I'll start a podcast, and I didn't know the difference between a mixing board and a mixing bowl, and my wife would say, I don't even know what a mixing bowl is. So anyway, so I had to dive into podcasting, but it was testing the brain. It was new challenges, something new. You know this is a podcast. There's always something you're learning. Yeah. And so I decided I'll do a podcast and I'll interview authors, and I will start out featuring their books, supporting them, but I will also ask them questions about their writing process and try to learn something about writing. And so I started that journey, and it started small, but then it got bigger, and we went for 400 episodes and interviewed around 500 authors, and 33 states and a lot of countries, and a lot of first-time writers, middle writers, best-selling writers, but a lot of common themes in there, and a lot of secrets I stole, with their permission, of course, because writers are sharing people. So that gave me the courage to try to write my first full-blown novel, because I'd written some novellas and I'd written a couple other things, and that's when I started writing this series that I'm writing now, which we can talk about a little bit later. But that got me going into the writing process, and so yes, it's kept me busy in my third act.
Yeah. I recently went on another podcast, and we were talking about this, kind of the evolution of being a reader and then ending up with a podcast about books. And there's certain things that you allow yourself that you realize, oh, I can do this. And I think it is those small stepping stones that you're like, oh, okay, well, I did this, I've done that. And you prove to yourself that you can try something new, which sometimes I think can be a bit scary, right? Of stepping out into doing something totally different than you've done before.
I think it's one of the reasons people get stuck at their desk and never retire.
Yeah.
They don't know what to do with the rest of their life. And I kind of joke that if the lawyers stay in the profession too much beyond 65, they'll never get out. It'll be like the Hotel California. They'll be they'll be stuck for life. So get out, get out, get out while you can.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's all kind of opportunities out there, and people realize that once they make the switch that there's a lot of learning to do, and I believe in being a lifelong learner,
Yeah.
always learning new things, trying new things, um, and yeah, so there's lots of creative venues out there for the people to explore, and I just happen to choose writing, and it's provided a nice community of people who are creative. It's a lot more fun being at a cocktail party with a bunch of writers than it is with a bunch of lawyers.
I had a guest
Yeah.
recently say, she's like, I'm a really great guest at a cocktail party because I research
Yeah.
so many different avenues. I have this surface
Yeah.
level knowledge of so many different things. I'm a great
Right.
conversationalist, like.
Right. Right. Right.
So,
Yeah.
have you found, because I have found this in my show, that there are a high percentage of lawyers that turn to be writers?
I have. I interviewed a number of them on the podcast,
Yeah.
several from the area I'm in North Carolina, and also, if you take David Baldacci, who was on my show several times,
Oh,
he
that's
was a
great.
lawyer and
Yeah.
turned writer and very prolific. And it's all the same thing. Lawyers think they know how to do everything, and we don't, of course, but we think that, well, what's the big deal? Let's just go write a book, and and
Yeah.
and it's a little bit harder than you think because lawyers tend to write in passive voice a lot, and passive
Okay.
voice does not interest readers, and so you've got to flip it around. It wasn't the man got hit by the truck. The truck barreled into and
Yeah.
destroyed the man. you know, there's a difference in how you write, right? And so I think those are little things, and then it's just. But I do think lawyers are disciplined when it comes to making lists and doing research and staying after it, and those are some traits that writers have to have, to stay after it. And so yeah, the ones that would prefer, want to play golf and just write an hour here and there aren't going to make it, but the ones that stick with it, and like David Baldacci said on my show, he said he's learning new things every day. He says
Yeah.
every time he writes a book. So yeah, lawyers are jumping into the writing, and it's good because I think anyone who has experience in a field, whether it's law, medicine, banking, you name it, IT, whatever, if they start writing a series and they use their expertise in that series, maybe picking a character or a profession, it helps shine a light more realistically on what goes on
Yeah.
in that profession. And I like those kind of books. That's why I like a medical thriller written by, an anesthesiologist. That's why I like, a legal thriller written by a former lawyer. They've
Yeah.
been there, they understand it, and you can see some things and learn some things that you wouldn't learn otherwise.
Yeah. Absolutely. And to the person listening, back to our previous comment about, thinking outside the box and other creative avenues, I think it's such a pleasant surprise when your skills translate to other things. And so thinking outside the box of your skill set as just like my job was a physical therapist. And so just thinking in that box, but that has translated so well to podcasting in very many ways. So there's just different ways to use your skills that once you see that, it's a really, enlightening experience, I guess.
Yeah, one of the so when I was in college, I was an athlete, played football. I was not spending time in the library like I should have all the time. And one of my classmates at one of our reunions said, I took this as a compliment. He said, Landis, you're one of the last people that Davis and I expected who would be able to write a novel. He said, but it's pretty good, So I thought, okay, I did it.
Yeah,
That's high praise.
exactly.
Yeah.
So when you started the podcast journey, what made you choose books? Had you always been a reader?
Yeah, I've always loved reading. And of course, as a lawyer, you read a lot, but whenever I got vacation time or at the beach, yeah, I can go through a pile of books at the beach.
Yeah.
Put an umbrella out there and a cooler of beer and give me a couple of books, and we'll knock out a book a day. On the beach. It's just a great. I love doing it. And if I'm on a plane, I can read a book. If I've got time, I read a book. If I'm not feeling, you know, the brightest on a particular day, grab a book, you get into it, you find yourself in another world.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've always loved reading. It's something I've done all my life, and I still do.
Yeah. So through your podcasting journey, you've interviewed more than 500 authors. And you've kind of mentioned it already. Like, what did you learn through the show about storytelling and writing? And I know that's a very big and
Yeah,
broad question, but
it's a very, very broad question. So let me give
yeah,
you an idea about. So I was worried about that I would forget what I had learned. So I took about 6 months, but after the first novel came out in the series I'm writing, and with my co-hosts on the podcast, we put together a series of 8 books called the Right Quotes series, and we divided it. And I was just at first I was just going to write a quote book with quotes from the podcast so I could
yeah,
remember what everybody told me. But I had so much information, I had to divide it into 8 different books. And so the different books are, there's one on the writing life, which is sort of a general overview of what authors say about it. But I had a book on learning to write, a book on writing process and tools, a book on
wow,
storytelling, inspiration, research, a book on writing techniques and characters, a book on writing community, revision, and editors, and then one I like, The Emotional Writing Journey, where
wow,
writers, think they'll never get through it, but they do. And then a book on publishing and book marketing, because we all talk about that too. So
yeah,
all these different quotes, and I'll just give you one quote to start with, and if we want to talk about more, we can. But I interviewed an author who's a poet. He's recently passed away, but he taught at my alma mater, Davidson College, Tony Abbott, and he said, "Writing is not about writing necessarily. Writing is about living, and the more deeply and fully you live, the more you are able to write." And this feeds into this idea that it's never too late to start writing.
yeah,
That somebody says, "Well, I'm 50 or I'm 60 or I'm 70. I can't. It's too late to start this." Well, why? When you're 80, you might have written 4 books by now.
yeah,
But the other point is that having that lived experience,
yeah,
you've got a lot more to say. You've got a lot more. It's why people who come out of college in their 20s and want to write the best-selling novel have a little bit harder time because they haven't lived enough, right? They haven't seen enough. But the people that have, and I just thought that was such a great. It has nothing to do with technique, what he said. It
yeah,
has to do with living. And so yeah, and I found that most of the writers I interviewed on the podcast, I mean, they do it for all different kind of reasons, but it always comes back to they want to say something, they want to explore their creative juices. They have a common urge to use the written word to tell a story. And DNA is so storytelling is so embedded in our DNA. I
yeah,
think one of our writers said that it's just a way that we can keep the process going. I found that you know. I don't know. There's so many things here that I could say about it. One author said, we all start with a blank page. Writing is the best of times and the worst of times. It's just, it's like, and some of it is just bricklaying, they say. And yeah, it's one of these things that, I mean, I learned that, and maybe this is from the emotional writing journey part. I learned that every writer on this, from the beginning writer to the best-selling authors, experience rejection, right?
yeah,
Steve Berry, who's on the show, he's been published millions of thrillers. He was rejected 86 times before his first book was taken. Now,
wow,
put some of this in perspective. John Grisham's first book, he went to he had 1,000 books printed with his first run of Time to Kill before he hit it. And after his first book event, he had about 996 of them left. And he said he carried them around in his trunk for years. And so it becomes
wow,
once you realize that these and other very successful authors are experiencing the same thing, they're being rejected or they're concerned about what will happen next, then you can say, oh, well, okay, that's normal. That's normal behavior. If
yeah,
if they're going through that, then and certainly, I can go through that too. It sort of taught me that, the basics are going to, the basic challenges that you're going to face as an author are going to be there for all authors. You're going to get rejected. You're going to have times where you don't think what you're writing is any good. You're going to have that self-doubt, but then you're going to have support. That's why a writing community is so important. You're going to have people that gather around you and say, hang in there, you can do it. And then you're going to realize that if you stick with it, if you just hang in there, if you persevere to persevere, eventually you're going to have something that's published. And it's why one writer on the podcast says, it's not talent necessarily that gets people published. It's stick-to-itiveness. It's the person who doesn't quit.
Yeah.
So there you go. It's just I was very inspired by the writers that was on the podcast because I knew when I interviewed them how much work they put in to create this book. I mean, every day people can read a book in a day or two, and they say, "What's coming out next?" And you're like, "Damn, that took me." 2 years to write that thing, or 20 years, or 10 years. I'll give it to you. It'll be the next week. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But it was a great experience, and I did the books just so that there's something there. And the first one, by the way, The Writing Life, is free to download on.
Perfect. Okay.
So people can go get the right quotes, The Writing Life, and get a sense of, what these authors are saying about what it means to be a writer. And so.
Well, wonderful. I'll include that link in the show notes as well, so they can find that, because those sound great. And who would have thought, right? I mean, I think as you were talking of, you started this, and then who would have thought you have 8 books of all the quotes from all the episodes that you have done? I mean, it just, when you are persistent and you show up, right? And then what comes out of that is what a wonderful experience. Well, we've kind of leaned over to the writing life. So let's talk about your writing life. Okay. For listeners that maybe haven't picked up your indie retirement mystery series yet, can you tell them a little bit about it?
Yeah, so this series kind of falls in the mystery thriller genre, kind of a cozy with the thrill. Cozy only because it's set in a retirement community, but I've got some very competent, savvy characters. It's kind of a lighthearted legal thriller. But I'll give you a sort of the little general synopsis here. So it's murder, mines, and missing millions. Retirement just got interesting. We have a shady real estate developer who's found murdered beneath one of the protagonists' family home in uptown Charlotte, shot, stabbed, and surrounded by rare 1830s gold coins. And her estranged twin brother, who's been in prison for 20 years, is the prime suspect. He says he's innocent, but he's not willing to name the real culprit. So with him refusing to talk and millions missing from the retirement community accounts, their operating account, their capital account has been depleted. The future of the retirement community is on the line. And now Harriet, who's 70, savvy, and willing to dive into the history to kind of uncover the past, and her partners, Craig Travail, a retired lawyer and a reluctant romantic, and Yeager Alexander, a 75-year-old conspiracy theorist and a resident rabble-rouser. They have to dig into the past to solve the crime. And their best lead is a decades-old memoir from Harriet's treasure-obsessed father and whispers of a long-lost gold hoard. But treasure has a way of attracting trouble. As fortunes vanish and suspects multiply, this trio of competent retirees must untangle 2 decades of betrayal before the killer strikes again. Murder, mayhem, and the Carolina Gold Rush. Welcome back to the Independence retirement community, where retirement is anything but quiet.
I love it.
So I like to infuse some history into this series here. The first in the series focused on a little known fact that there was a first American Declaration of Independence before there was the Declaration of Independence, and it happened in Charlotte, North Carolina in 1775.
I didn't know this.
Yeah,
like what?
Yeah, exactly. and that's deadly declarations. And in fact, it's such a controversial thing because Virginia tried to deny it for years. John Adams accused Thomas Jefferson of copying from it when he wrote the Declaration of Independence. And I thought, well, that's a great thing for a novel, right? So in my first book, we solved the mystery of the Mecklenburg Declaration of Independence. And I thought, In the second book, few people know that the first gold rush in the United States took place in the Carolinas.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
and
had no
so
idea.
and so Charlotte, now a banking city with big tall towers, few people know, even people that live there, that under the streets of Charlotte are old gold mines, right? And
Okay.
so I thought, I know, I'm going to bury a body in one of these old gold mines in uptown Charlotte. And because the very first U.S. branch mint was put in Charlotte, North Carolina in 1837, and they coined these gold coins that had a C on them for Charlotte.
Okay.
I draped the body in 1837, 38 gold coins. So there's the mystery. Why is the
Yeah.
body there in a gold mine shaft? Why are these coins there? And what does it have to do with, the Independence retirement community and the fact that they're missing all their money? I also focused on elder fraud in this novel
Yeah.
because it has become such a thing. So the India has gotten itself in trouble. The retirees have wrongly invested in gold bullion, put all their retirement assets there. They've also invested in an underground gold mine venture in uptown Charlotte that's sure to be a scam. And so Harriet and Yeager and Craig have to figure out a way not only to, prevent Harriet's brother from going to prison. There is a murder trial in the case, but to save the Indy from, bankruptcy. And if we just would go back a little bit, you said why set it in a retirement community?
Yeah.
Uh, it kind of feeds into our earlier conversation because we talked about, what do you do in your third act? And, a lot of people get this ageism idea that once you get to be in your late 50s or 60s, you're kind of done. You're over the hill. There's nothing left in life. And one of the characters, a 65-year-old lawyer who ends up in this retirement community, thinks the same thing in book one. He thinks his life is over. He thinks he's among the walking dead, that all they're there for is their next meal, right? That he thinks this is over. And
Yeah.
he has to come to terms with the fact that no, people are living productive, exciting, interesting lives. And so I thought, who better to solve these mysteries than people that have a lot of life experience? You don't want to give it to a youngster, right? Why not give it to somebody who's got experience? And I also joke with my writer friends that, look, if I need somebody with experience to solve, a murder or to solve a historic mystery, I just move them into the retirement community before the next book starts, and then we have them
It's an easy
as an
way.
expert. Yeah, but it got, obviously I don't live in a retirement community yet. I am 68 years old, and one day I will. But these are not nursing homes where nothing's happening, right?
Yeah.
A lot's going on. A lot of fun things, exciting things are happening in retirement communities. But I learned about them because I had to move my parents into retirement community. My brother and sister, younger than me, said it's the job of the firstborn to do this. And I said, "What are you talking about? There's no rule
Yeah.
that says that." And so I had to go around and take my parents to all these retirement communities
Yeah.
around in Charlotte and learned about the emotions of having to leave your home of 50 years and move into retirement community and the newness that you would experience, and yet the fact that you're going to meet a new community, you're going to find new things to do. And she pushed me all the way. Didn't want to go all this stuff. But funny story is that after she got in there after about 6 months, and I'm listening to her talk to some of her friends, she says, moving over here was the best idea I ever had. And I thought, okay, well, as long as she wants to take that, that's good. But
Yeah.
in doing that, I saw, they're playing pickleball, they're playing croquet. In fact, in this novel here, I try to break up the tense scenes and the mystery and the thriller with some liveliness that goes on in the community. And so there is a sort of a croquet fiasco that takes place at the croquet match in this particular novel. And I got the idea because I went with my mother one time when she's still living. She was playing croquet in her last part of her life, and they do it inside on the carpet, fast rolling carpet.
Okay.
But they all sit along one side and they're all dressed in white, the true
Okay.
whites, and they're all quiet. Shh, can't say a word, shh.
Yeah.
And I was thinking to myself when I was there, I said, I wonder what happened if a fight broke out in the middle of the croquet. And so in my book, I have a fight break out, and everybody just you kind of ramp it up a little bit and
Yeah.
have some fun with it. But that's what led me into writing that, because I thought, well, that's an interesting setting. People might be curious about what goes on there, but also, the history kind of keeps bringing me back to. They're not necessarily historical, although they have been classified. in some historical fiction things, but it's kind of a dual timeline. You have some stuff going on
Yeah.
in the past, and then you have the present, and the present has to solve the past. So that's what it's all
I
about.
love it.
Yeah,
Yeah, I had author Amanda Cox on the show, and
yeah,
she referred to certain themes that were catnip for her, and I've kind of adapted that saying. And for me, it is older characters in novels. So you had me sold from retirement community. I'm like, oh no, this is I just
yeah,
like you said, they can infuse so much wisdom into a
right.
story. And I love the historical piece as well, because you mentioned that history was one of the things you enjoy. So you've got that woven in, and we get to learn not only, like you said, from maybe the characters that have those jobs, but also the history of
Yeah,
that.
yeah. I've always liked watching shows where or reading books where at the end I go, I wonder if that's true. And it used to be
Yeah.
you'd go pull this thing off the shelf that was kind of a boat anchor weight called an
Yep.
encyclopedia,
Yeah.
and now you just go on your phone and you Google it and did that really happen? So I want people at the end of my novels to look, go, wait a minute, that can't be true. And then they Google it and they go, gosh, okay. And then they look further and they look further
Yeah.
and then, that kind of thing.
Yeah. When it makes us want to research more, I think that's the sign of a good book
Yeah, yeah,
here.
yeah.
So I love it. What have you learned about yourself through writing?
Um, I've learned that sometimes stubbornness can be a good thing, because you really do have to be stubborn about, finishing and
Yeah.
getting through things. And writing's, a challenge. And you're asking me these questions about writing in the middle of a book launch, 3 or 4 weeks into it, where my head's spinning with all the things I've got to do. And you want to say, writing's terrible. No one wants to be right. You shouldn't be, So it's kind of like asking somebody how they like rock climbing when they're hanging on the edge of a cliff,
Yeah.
in the middle of trying to finish their climb. I like it better if I can get through this. But I have learned that, you know, I know it's cliche, but that, old dogs can learn new tricks. And I do think that that's a good message for people that, you know, and look, you can't just say, I'm going to go into an echo chamber and do this. I mean, to become a writer, I took advice from people who'd done it before
Yeah.
who said, go join writing groups. So I joined a North Carolina writing network. I joined several local community writing organizations. I went to conferences. I interviewed authors.
Yeah.
I mean, you're learning, and so in the process of learning, you're becoming better, at doing. And I felt like, toward the end of my legal career, I'd done a lot of these things, and I was kind of tired of representing big companies fighting over money. And I
Yeah.
thought I'd rather try to learn something new. And I'm not making any money. It's not about the money, right?
Yeah.
It's about putting the story out and being, trying to do something that's entertaining that people read. And funny, so I've got a grandson, and I can't get through a podcast without talking about my grandson. But he's 4 years old, and we had a little book signing recently, and he was sitting there listening to me talk, and he came up during my talk. We were doing it at the gallery, and he says, Grandis. He calls me Grandis,
Oh, that's
but he
so cute.
but he can't say the R, so it's
Yeah.
Grandis. He
Yeah.
says, Grandis, and I lean over to listen. He goes, Grandis, could you put me in your next novel, put my name in your next novel? So
Oh.
maybe there's going to have to be a grandkid or something in the next book,
Yeah.
or some good guy named Simon. I don't know, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Have you read the book Gordon Corman's Old School? Or do you know who Gordon Corman is? He
I
writes
heard.
middle grade novels, and
Okay,
he's written like over 100 novels.
yeah, yeah.
But there's a book he's written a book called Old School, and it's about uh, basically a child that has to go live in a retirement community
Oh,
because
really?
I think he was orphaned, if I remember correctly. But it is hilarious because it ends up being like he also realizes like that ageism, like these people actually have things to teach him, but he's kind of, he moves to a new school, and it's a whole journey, but it's about him growing up in a retirement community with his grandparents. So
That,
it's
that,
pretty
that's
funny.
that's a great idea, because we're always talking. I think I heard you on one podcast talking about what kids, when they ask questions, what's this, what's that. I was riding
Yeah.
yesterday, and Simon, I said, look at those people over there jogging. He says, Gwandis, what's jogging?
Yeah.
I said, well, it's kind of running, but not fast as you can.
Yeah.
He says, oh, so they can maybe conserve their energy. And I
Yeah.
said, yeah, you're a smart kid,
I think watching their brains think is so insightful because they're still curious about the world. And I think we
Yeah.
lose that as adults. So I aspire to be my children sometimes in their
He,
curiosity.
he's in a French immersion. He's in a French immersion, but he's only 4 years old, so he's not. I asked him yesterday. I said, Simon, do they ever read stories in school? He said, yes. I said, well, did they read a story today? He said, yes. And I said, well, what was it about? He said, Landis, I don't know. It was in French. He said, I know how to say bonjour when they say bonjour, but I
Yeah.
didn't. And I said, well, what was it about? He said, it was about animals. Okay, so you're getting
Yeah.
something out of it. So,
Yeah.
but kids say the darndest things, as Art Linkletter used to say,
Yeah,
right? Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah, yeah,
Well,
yeah.
let's switch gears a little bit and let's talk
Yeah.
about who you are as a reader. What genres do you enjoy?
So, I'm going to talk about a few westerns today. I love the westerns. I've got one of the biggest, I wouldn't say fights, but disagreements my wife and I ever had was I went away one weekend, came back to find out she'd sold all my Louis L'Amour paperbacks in a in a yard sale. And these are all beat up, the things you read on
Yeah.
the beach and stuff. And she said, well, look, don't worry, I can tell you every story. She says, the guy rides into town, the school marm comes out, the big bully gets after the school marm, he takes care of the bully, and then he says, I've got to go out west. I'm gonna have to leave you behind. And he runs off into the sunset. And I said, okay, well, you
Yeah.
got me there. But anyway, I read a lot of those coming along, but I've always enjoyed thrillers. I've always enjoyed mysteries. I love the old British mysteries. I love reading them. I love watching the PBS shows with Masterpiece Theater. I like reading historical fiction. I've read a lot of books involving the British Navy in the 1890s and the Napoleonic War era because they got some great characters and sea captains and that kind of thing. I love suspense, and I love the kind of things that I'm writing. There's several writers that are writing in this retirement community setting. Richard Osman has written The Thursday Murder
Yes.
Club, and I
Yes.
love those. I love those books, and I thought the movie. Some people didn't like it, but I like the movie just because of these really talented actors and actresses who went in and played these roles. Pierce Brosnan, who's 007, who's in a
Yeah.
swimming pool with the old ladies, doing this and that. So I like reading those as well. I mean, I really, when it comes down to it, I like a book that has good characters and a good setting. Because I spoke to, I think it was John Hart, I interviewed on the podcast, New York Times bestselling author. He said, I asked him the difference or what was more important, plot or character. And he said, it's always character. He says, you can have a kind of a weak plot, but if you got really good characters, the readers will forgive you for it. But if you've got terrible characters, they won't care about the plot. They won't care what happens to them. And that's true. I mean, I want to
Yeah.
care what happens to the characters. And so anything that's got really good characters, I'm into it. I haven't read as much fantasy and that kind of thing. And my wife is into witches. She likes to read books with lots of witches and time travel and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But I'm more into the mystery, the thriller, the historical fiction, and westerns I kind of see as historical as well because the old west is
Yeah.
it's behind us now, so that's kind of historical fiction as well now.
Yeah. You get transported to that era, right? And you get
Yeah,
to learn about
exactly.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, how in your busyness do you find time to read?
So I'm busy, but I mean, somebody asked me this book event. I said, but I'm retired. I can choose my schedule. And they were asking, well, you do write every day? And I said, again, refer back to the previous answer. I'm retired. I can set
Yeah.
my schedule. If you're doing this for a business or you're doing this to try to produce a certain amount of books, you probably do have to be writing every day and get so
Sure.
many words. But I'm more of a binge writer. I like to get an idea first. I like to do a little research. And then once I get that, I can write 4, 5, 6 hours a day and knock out a bunch. It'll go away for a week
Yeah.
and write a lot. And so that's how I do it. I do it sporadically because I like to go on golf trips with my friends. So we go play golf, and I like to play with my grandson. I like to fly fish in the mountains, And around all those things, they're reading opportunities. Like you come in from playing golf and everybody has had dinner and whatever, you go back to your room, you still got an hour or two, we jump into a book, right?
Yeah.
Or you're on the plane, you jump into a book, or you're at the cabin, you go fishing, you come back, you get a beer, you jump into a book. So yeah, I'm always reading, always finding time for that, and always not finding as much time for writing right now because I'm trying to, you know, out there promote a
Yeah,
book.
the
And
tour.
people seem to think you're ambidextrous. You can do both at the same time, but it's like, trying to breathe and be underwater at the same time.
Yeah. It really uses different parts of your brain and it all requires time and attention, right?
Yeah, it does. But I will
Yeah.
say this, that there's a lot of authors who say, I don't want to be a marketer, but there's a lot of creativity that goes into marketing because
Yeah.
one of the things I've done, which has been fun, you can't put too much history in a book or you'll bore people. It's like that encyclopedia. You got to give them just enough.
Yeah.
But there's so much that you've researched that you can't put in the book. You go, darn, what am I doing with all that information? I spent all that time gathering it. So what you do is you create some PowerPoints, you create a presentation, and when you go out, you don't go out and talk about your book. You go out and talk. So I go and talk about the history of the first Declaration of Independence. I go out and talk about the history of the Carolina Gold Rush, and
Yeah.
then toward the end I go, oh, and by the way,
Yeah.
I wrote a couple of books that relate to this. Yeah.
Like the backdoor marketing,
Yeah,
right? I
yeah,
always think of it like that.
exactly. Because there's too many times people are shouting, "Buy my book" at the top, on the rooftop. But if you're saying, "Hey, let me tell you a story about, how gold was discovered in the Carolinas in 1799 by a little kid who was fishing in his father's farm and looked down in the creek and saw something shiny, and he reached down and picked it up, and it was a 17-pound gold nugget." And
Yeah.
he took it home to his dad and he showed it to his dad, and his dad didn't know what it was. And they took it to a silversmith and he didn't know what it was. And so, as one author said in the book he wrote about the gold rush, it became the world's most expensive doorstop for 3 years. You know,
Yeah.
that 17-pound gold nugget was a doorstop for 3 years until they figured out what it was.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and then you talk about all that and the history, and the
Yeah.
history, I think, gets people interested in it. Anyway, I think I diverged from where we were going.
No, I think that's great because I also, I use that for podcast marketing in a sense, right? If I'll go and teach a class on pitching podcasts.
Right.
And not that I'm really necessarily looking for guests in that, but when you interview so many authors over 4 or 5 years, you have something that you can teach, and I think that people want to take something away, right? They want something tangible. So whether it's learning about something or learning to pitch podcasts or whatever it is, and then having like, oh wait, yeah, then I wrote a book, or I mean, that's not me,
Yeah.
but like just you have those extras to give to them.
And to your point about pitching podcasts, we probably did this in your presentation. What I try to tell authors is when you're pitching a podcast, it's not about you. It's about, what the guests on that podcast might want to hear. What can you bring to the show that it's not just you and your book? What else
Exactly.
can
That's what I tell them. Like, you are not your book.
yeah, what else can you talk about that might be
Yes.
of interest to readers and writers, and pitch that. Don't pitch, I wrote the greatest book since sliced bread.
Absolutely. And that's what we spend some time in my class when I do it of brainstorming your speaking topics because you are so much more broad than just your book that you wrote or whatever it is you're coming to pitch. But yeah, so I totally know exactly what you're talking about. But you have brought 3 books with you today in the form of a book flight. Can you tell us how you chose these books?
Yeah, so when I was thinking about the books I like to read, and I thought about Westerns, and I thought about my favorite book of all time, and I thought to myself, but that doesn't really necessarily fit what I'm writing. I thought, well, still, it's my favorite book of all time, so we're going to start there. So it's Lonesome Dove by Larry McMurtry. I just think it's just a classic. I've loved it. I've loved the book. I love the movie. It won the Pulitzer Prize in 1986. For those that have never read it, don't think, well, I don't like Westerns. This is the epic hero's journey. Lonesome Dove is a Western, but it's really about 2 retired Texas Rangers. Again, they're retired, right?
Okay.
They don't know what to do with their lives. They've been fighting bandits all their lives. They're on the southern border, the Rio Grande. And Augustus McCrae, who was played by Robert Duvall in the movie, and Tommy Lee Jones, who played Woodrow Call, are talking about what's next. And Augustus says, let's round up some cattle and go north. first cattle drive to Montana. Are you crazy? Let's do it. What have we got to lose? And so they gather all their people, including Lorena Darling, who's the local whore, and they've got, Dietz and PI and all the others, and they start out on this cattle drive, and they're collecting cattle on the way, and they go all the way from the southern tip of the U.S. up to Montana, and along
Yeah.
the way, it's adventure after adventure after adventure, and it's heartache and it's happiness and it's characters and it's love and life and Indians and cowboys and it's just it's really something I would highly recommend.
Yeah,
And I
it's
love,
interesting you bring
yeah,
that up because a few years ago, had heard about a Century of Great Books challenge where you read a book from every year for the past century. And so
right.
Lonesome Dove is my book for what was it published in 1986? I don't know what year, but it's
Yeah.
like it's in the 80s in there. And I have not picked it up yet, but you're encouraging me that it's time.
So I saw something as I was doing this research for this. Of the top 10 Western novels based on critic choices, it's number one.
Yeah.
Okay. And, it's also grossed, I don't know how many millions in sales. But anyway, that's the first one.
Okay. So that was Lonesome Dove by Larry
Awesome.
McMurtry.
Right. And then I told you about my wife, selling for a nickel all my, Louis L'Amour books. So I have to bring Louis L'Amour into it. In fact, I've also got, when he died, I've got a little picture on the wall here taken from the Charlotte Observer. One of the cartoonists did a cartoon of a rider on horseback going down through one of these canyons, and the canyon walls, have book bindings as the canyon walls with the names of books as he's riding off into the sunset.
Oh,
And
that's
so,
cool.
and
I love
anyway,
it.
so I had a hard time picking, which books because Louis L'Amour was so prolific. But I picked the Sackett Family Saga,
Okay.
which is a 17 book saga. Um, it's part of sort of this epic Western series that follows these Irish English clan from the 17th century Appalachian wilderness to the late 19th century American West, immigrating to the U.S. And then going over the Appalachians and heading west.
Okay.
And they're not necessarily in a particular order, but they've got all these characters that are, they're law abiding, they're challenging the frontier, they're independent, they're fierce, they're loyal. But there's always going to be a gunfight in there somewhere too if you're looking for a Western. But it's also it's like that little shtick I talked about earlier. Yeah, they're going to ride off into the sunset at
Yeah.
some point because they're heading west. So that's just you can find a lot of good books in there with good characters.
So do you have to
And
read them in order then?
I don't think this series you have to read in order. I asked him, I
Okay.
looked into that, but so the top 10 Western novels based on books sold. The first one is Hondo by Louis L'Amour, 30 plus million.
Wow.
Um, Lonesome Dove is fourth. The Sackett, which is one of the books in the Sackett series by Louis L'Amour, 10 plus million. So maybe
Wow.
start with Sackett, in the
Yeah.
Sackett series, and read about, one of the Sacketts there.
Okay.
Uh, and yeah, so that
Perfect.
was that was it. And then for the third one, I was thinking about um, a different kind of Western by an author who's written some very dark but award-winning books, Cormac McCarthy, All the Pretty Horses. That book sold 7 plus million. It's ranked ninth on top 10 Western novels of all time. Um, he's This is an interesting book because you have this protagonist, um, a young 16-year-old who travels to Mexico in 1949 after his family's ranch is sold. It's kind of a coming of age story, but
Okay.
it's what they have to go through crossing the border and dealing, and horses are at the center of it. And it's just wonderfully written from a literary standpoint. So don't think, oh, this is just a rough and tumble Western where we got the mesquite and the gun. You're really getting into some interesting writing.
Yeah.
There's violence. It's Old West meeting New West kind of things. But yeah, so those three, I think. And why, Landis, are you recommending these if you're writing a novel set in a retirement community? And I think, well, again, it gets back to the characters. These are such interesting characters
Yeah.
in all these books, and the setting is interesting, and that's what draws me to them. So,
Yeah.
give it a try, and start with Lonesome Dove, and if I'm wrong, let me know. And
Yeah. Well, that was actually one of the first iterations of Bookish Flights was I wanted to try reading outside of my genre, my go-to
right,
genres, the ones I
right, yeah,
normally read. And I thought, well, fantasy, I mean, you had mentioned I hadn't read a
yeah,
lot of fantasy. And so I thought, what if
right,
I have people come on and they give us three books, like they're a fantasy reader, they give us three books they would recommend in the fantasy genre to try. So I love it because we're cycling back to we haven't done Westerns yet. And it's give these three books a try, see if it's for you. Because how can we say we don't like something when we haven't really even explored that genre?
exactly. And I look forward to diving into your list now that I know you've got that list out there of all the the series. I think it's a great idea you're doing because people like things that come in threes for one thing. A
Yeah.
lot of things that come in threes. And if you get into one thing and they're similar to the other, people like kind of like a series, but these don't have to be a series. They're just
No.
somewhat related,
Yeah.
books. And I like that. I like that theme as well. So I look forward to diving into your list and getting some good ideas for reads. Yeah.
Yeah, and I do have a list on the website.
Yeah.
I need to update it because it was up
Yeah.
through episode 175, but it's broken down by genre as well. So that way,
Yeah.
if you're new to the show and you're seeing 200, I think 205 came out this week. If you're seeing that and you're like, wow, that is overwhelming,
Yeah. Yeah.
you can go and they are broken down by fantasy and
Yeah.
historical fiction, and you can figure out which episodes might appeal to your fancy and find some book
There you go.
recommendations for you. But the other part of the three was, as readers, we could really fire hose on recommendations.
Mhm.
Once you get talking about books, we could give you 10 to 15 books in a matter of a few minutes. So it was like, well, let's stick to three book recommendations. And then that way, listeners
Yeah.
feel like they have a chance to actually do this and not feel like, I'm so overwhelmed. There's way too
Exactly.
much to read.
Exactly. Exactly.
So, well, thank you for bringing those books with you today.
Yeah.
How I love to end our show is with a speed round of questions you can answer really quick.
All right.
Are you a rereader?
Only Lonesome Dove.
Okay.
And
I'm
there's
gonna,
there's too many books out there to read, right?
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. I'm gonna switch this question up for you, and this might be really hard to answer. If someone was new to the Charlotte Readers podcast, what episode would you tell them to start with? Or do you have a favorite interview, standout interview for you?
This will sound weird, but the last one, the 400th episode.
Okay.
And the reason I say that, all of our hosts, we get together and we talk about a lot of the things that we learned and different things on the show. So that'll be a good one to start with. And then you can
Okay.
work back. Then you can work backwards. There's a
Yeah.
list on the website for all the episodes and who's there and what we talk about. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Where is your favorite place to read?
Oh, my favorite place to read, probably on the front porch of my cabin in the mountains on a nice summer day when there's a little breeze. Yeah.
Yeah. Sounds ideal.
Or can I do two? Can
You
I do
can.
two? All right. On the beach, right?
Yeah.
Wrightsville Beach, North Carolina. I love reading on the beach. Don't have to worry about if I get sand in the book, or I take my Kindle out there and read. Yeah,
Yeah.
I love reading on the beach because I like the waves as background, as I read.
Yeah. For me as a mom, going to the beach with my kiddos is fantastic too because it's like a
Yeah,
white noise machine.
yeah,
So
exactly.
they
Yeah,
are playing, and my kids
yeah,
are a bit older now, so I trust them in the water, right?
right.
But they can play and mom can read her book because I can't really hear what they're screaming about
Right.
because
Yeah,
the waves are drowning it out. So it's a great place for me too.
yeah, exactly.
And lastly, what are you reading next?
So I'm reading right now a mystery by Webb Hubbell. It's called The 18th Green. Webb was U.S. Attorney General at one time,
Okay.
but he was disbarred and went to prison. Wrote a book, Friends in Low Places.
Okay.
Came out of there, became a fiction writer, good friend of Bill Clinton, and he became a really good fiction writer. He writes this Jack Patterson legal thriller novels about an antitrust lawyer, um,
Okay.
and so that's what I started 2 days ago. after just finishing a Western by Robert Parker called Revelation. I thought doing this, I thought I better go read a Western.
Yeah.
And so that was about a couple of U.S. Marshals who have to track down these bad guys after a prison break. So that was kind of like 3:10 to Yuma, that movie. So that was kind of fun. So as you can see, I'm shifting from like this to this to this when I read, but I enjoy a good mystery.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show with me this morning. I really appreciate all the time you've given me.
It's been a pleasure. And again, as I say, I look forward to looking at your list and diving back into some of those episodes with authors who recommended those books.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to this episode today with Landis Wade, including his book flight of Western books. We'd love to hear what other books you'd pair with this book flight at bookishflights.com. If you enjoyed the show, please head over to Apple Podcasts and leave a review. Your review not only helps the show, but it also helps the podcast to reach others. Make sure you are subscribed on Apple Podcasts or Spotify to make sure you will not miss an episode. That's it for today. Thank you so much for listening. As Emma Thompson said, I think books are like people in the sense that they'll turn up in your life when you most need them. Cheers to you, dear readers. Until next time.